The Story Without a Name by Barbey de Orfoli, translated by Edgar Saltus. Chapter 3. 10 o'clock in the morning. Lent was almost over. It was the day before Easter, and the ladies de Frejol, after assisting at the service and the washing of the altars, had returned to their home. The house was in the center of a little square that alone separated it from the church. The church itself was of the 13th century. Its frontal was Romantic, crushed in, so to speak, and with an energy that recalled the barbarian who flung himself flat on his face before the cross of our Lord. The square was paved with cat heads, triangular stones, and it was so small that these ladies who haunted the church could, when it rained, cross without an umbrella. The house in which they lived was an immense edifice of no particular style, built subsequent to the church. The ancestors of the Baron de Frejol had occupied it for generations, and, as consequence, it was sadly out of date. It was antique and uncomfortable, one of those habitations at which architects jeer, and the possessors decline to part with unless actual want compels. The black corners of dilapidated homes, where perhaps the ghosts of progenitors crouch, where childhood has played and age has come, cry out against such sacrilege. Madame de Frejol, who was born elsewhere, might have readily rid herself of the building, but she had preferred to keep it. There were traditions of her husband's family to be respected, and besides, as in the celestial city, this gaunt, grey, haggard house held for her walls of gold, walls that were indestructible, aglow with glitter, built by love in days of delight. It was with the idea of sheltering the progeny, in whose multiplication our forefathers took a religious pride, that the vast house was originally built. But now, since death had come, and its sole occupants were two women, lost in its immensity, it seemed vaster than before. It was cold, too, uninviting, imposing indeed, because it was spacious, and space makes a house magnificent as it does a landscape. Yet, such as it was, it interested everyone that visited it. The ceilings were remote, the corridors intersected, and they had a stairway steep as the stairs of a clock tower, and so broad that 14 horses could mount its 100 steps abreast, a feat that had been accomplished, it was said, during the war of the Camises Blanche and Jean Cavalier. The gigantic stairway seemed to have been built for another house. It was, perhaps, all that remained of some castle which had fallen to pieces, one perhaps which the misfortunes of the hour and of the people who inhabited it prevented from being re-erected on the plane of its primitive magnificence. It was there that Lasthany, without companions of her age, without the games that she might have shared with them, separated from all things by the grief and forbidding piety of her mother, passed the long hours of her joyless childhood. It may be that the emptiness of the immense stairway made her feel more keenly the other emptiness of an existence which a mother's love should have filled. It may be, like those predestined to misfortune, who torment themselves while awaiting the torment to come, it may be that the girl loved to mingle the weariness of the spacious stairway with the weariness of her empty youth. Generally speaking, Madame de Frejol left her room in the morning and did not return until night, a circumstance which may have led her to fancy that Lasthany was amusing herself in the garden, when, in reality, the child sat hour after hour, forgotten, on the dumb, sonorous stair. A hand on her cheek, the elbow on her knee, in that attitude which the genius of Albert Dürer gave to the figure of melancholy, she sat congealing in the stupor of a dream, as though in a vision she had seen her destiny ascend and reascend those terrible stairs. Surely, if places have an influence, then this gloomy mansion, which looked like an immense bat which had fallen with wings outstretched at the foot of the mountains, against which it lay, must have added a shadow of its own to the other shadows from which the immaculate forehead of that girl emerged. In so far as Madame de Frejol was concerned, her own melancholy could not have been increased. The influence of this place could not affect the bronze oxidized by grief. After the death of her husband, who had always lived largely and well, she plunged into religion to cool her heart. Every trace of luxury had disappeared. The horses and carriages were sold, the servants dismissed, all, in fact, save one, Agatha, who had grown old in her service, and who had come with her from Normandy. This change gave the gossips of the village something to cackle over. Madame de Fragile was accused of avarice, but presently the accusation fell of itself. The good that she did for the poor, though done secretly, became known, and at last, little by little, there came to the gossips a confused understanding of the beneficence and good qualities of this gentlewoman, who had withdrawn into retirement, and the dignity of grief really possessed. At church, and she was seldom seen elsewhere, a respectful curiosity surrounded her, and there, majestic in appearance, garmented in long black robes, motionless among the trembling arches and squat pillars of the rough Romanic edifice, she looked as might some former Merovingian queen that had issued from a tomb. And, after a fashion of her own, she was a sort of queen. She reigned unconsciously, without even wishing to, over the entire hamlet, which was not, it is true, a kingdom. But at least she reigned, and, if unlike the former kings of Persia, she was not invisible to her subjects, she resembled them by the distance she put between herself and the little world in which she lived, but with which she had nothing in common. Easter that year was in April, and the Saturday preceding it happened to be one of those work days which in the provinces are almost solemn. A year's linen had to be laundered. Since dawn, Agatha and the washerwoman had been hard at work. The garden paths behind the house were draped with sheets and napkins that floated, swollen by the breeze. As they dried, they were carried into the dining room, and there left in heaps for the ladies of Fragile, when they returned from Mass, to fold and arrange. That was a thing which no one else was permitted to do. Madame de Fragile took a real Norman pleasure in linen, one that her daughter shared, and long before she had begun on the superb trousseau which she was to give to Lasthany on her bridal day. So soon, therefore, as they reached home, they immediately sought the dining room, and at the table, one in front of the other, they sat their aristocratic hands to work. And as they worked, Agatha appeared with a flood of dry linen, which she dropped before them like an avalanche. "Saint Agatha," she cried, in expression of her, the name of her patron saint, "there's a lot for you. White, isn't it? And dry. And it smells good, too, more than both Madame and Mademoiselle can fold before dinner. But there, the dinner today can wait. Neither of you is ever hungry, and the capuchin has gone. Yes, indeed, and for good. That's the way with these capuchins, without so much as a word to those who have lodged them." Old Agatha, who had been young once, and handsome too, had accompanied her passionate mistress at the time of her scandalous elopement, and it was just that, together with having nursed Mademoiselle Fragile, and remained in what she called a marmot's hole, which gave her the right to speak freely. "Why, Agatha," said Madame de Fragile, severely, "what do you mean? Father Riculf gone? And don't you know that this is Good Saturday, and that vespers tomorrow he is to preach on the resurrection?" Agatha was an old maid, and by the Norman accent, which she had never lost, the Norman bonnet which she still wore, you could see that she was obstinate. "I can't help it. I know what I'm talking about," she answered. "The beadle came and asking for him this morning. There was a crowd at his confessional, awaiting absolution for the communion tomorrow. But I couldn't give him to the beadle, could I? At daybreak I met him on the stairs, and he had his hood over his head, and his hand with the staff which he usually leaves behind his bedroom door. He passed me straight as an eye, without a word, his eyes lowered, and my opinion is his eyes are worse when they are lowered than when they are not. I knew he couldn't have taken his staff to go to Mass, a step from here, so I followed on his heels to see where he was going. Well, he took the highway at the foot of the big cavalry, and I can tell you, if he has kept up the same gait, he's far away now, he and his sandals." "It is impossible," Madame de Fragile exclaimed. "He cannot have gone." "Like the smoke of my kitchen," Agatha insisted, "and with as little noise." And it was true. He really had gone. But the fact of the matter, which none of them knew, was this, that capuchins always depart in this fashion. They go as death and Christ come, like thieves. You enter their room some morning and they've evaporated. It is their custom and their poetry. Chateaubriand, who knew what poetry is, says of them, "The next day they were sought, but they had vanished like the holy apparitions that sometimes visit the hearts and homes of men. At that time, neither Chateaubriand nor his Génie du Chrétien existed. Moreover, the previous guests of the Ladies de Fragile had been both less poetic and less severe. Outside of the church they were men of the world, incapable of leaving a host without some courteous word of thanks and appreciation. But the Ladies de Fragile cared too little for the Capuchin to be annoyed, as Agatha was, by the silent abruptness of his departure. He had gone, had he? Well, let him go. During the time that he had been with them, he disappointed them more than he had pleased. Such were their thoughts. But Agatha felt more deeply. To her, Father Riculf represented that inexplicable thing which is called antipathy. "We are well rid of him," she muttered. Then, correcting herself, she added, "It may be wrong of me to speak of a man of God like that, but at the same time I can't help it. I have a poor opinion of him. And think of the difference between him and the others that have been here. Pleasant, all of them, apostolic and indulgent. There was that prior, don't you remember, madam? He was here 2 years ago. How nice he was! All in white like a bride, even to his shoes. Father Riculf resembles him as a wolf resembles a lamb." "You should not judge anyone," said Madame de Fragile gravely. It was for her conscience' sake, no doubt, that she spoke in this way, and perhaps also she reproached herself for the same thing which she blamed in her servant. "Father Riculf is a priest whose eloquence and faith are incontestable. Since he has been here, he has not said or done a single thing that anyone could find fault with. You have no right, Agatha, to think ill of him. Has she, Lasthany?" "No, mamma," Lasthany's pure voice replied. "But don't scold her. You and I have often said that there was something perplexing about him, something that we could not define. Why was it? We could not have thought ill of him, perhaps, but we did not trust him. You would not confess to him any more than I would." "And we have both been wrong, perhaps," Madame de Fragile replied. "We might both have done better. In refusing for groundless reasons to kneel at his feet, we condemned him in our hearts, a thing that we had no right to do." "Ah," said the young girl naively, "as for me, I never could. He impressed me with a dread that I could not overcome." "He talked of nothing but hell. Always was it on the tip of his tongue," panted Agatha, as though trying to justify the fear which the young girl expressed. "No one has ever talked so much about it. He damned us all. I knew a priest years ago in Normandy. They called him Father Love because he only preached of paradise and the love of God. Father Riculf will never be known by that name." "There," said Madame de Fragile, who wished the conversation to end because it was uncharitable. "There, be quiet. If Father Riculf were to come in now, for I cannot believe that on the eve of Easter he can have gone away, he would find us gossiping about him, which is not right. As for you, Agatha, since you think he is not here, go up to his room. You may find his breviary somewhere, and that will show that he has not gone." Agatha started on her errand at once. The two ladies said nothing further concerning the enigmatic Capuchin, of whom they knew little, and of whom they feared to think too much. Slowly they resumed the interrupted task. It was a simple picture of home life that these two ladies presented. The room was vast and high-ceilinged. About them were hillocks of white linen, which, as Agatha had said, smelled good, and exhaled the perfume of dew and of the hedges on which the linen had dried. The ladies were silent, but attentive to their work. Now and then, to fold a sheet rightly, they looked for the hem, which held a half, and struck it with the hand. The hands of each were beautiful, and they had a very particular beauty. Lasthany, that lily of the valley, delicious in a dark green gown that made her pale and melancholy face look like a flower in its leaves, and Madame de Fragile, in a black gown and widow's cap, her hair whitened about the temples less by years than by grief. Each had a beauty of her own. Suddenly Agatha reappeared. "He must have gone," she said. "I've looked everywhere and found but this, and whether he left it on purpose or forgot it when I went, I, for one, don't know." And on the sheet which the ladies were folding she placed a heavy rosary, such as Capuchins wear at the girdle. It was of ebony, and in the middle, to separate the black beads, was a death's head in yellow ivory. a color that made the head seem more skull-like, and gave it the appearance of having been disinterred long ago. Madame de Fragile stretched a hand, raised the rosary with respect, and, after examining it, put it down before her daughter. But Lasthany, as she picked it up, felt her fingers twitch and dropped it. "Keep it for yourself, mamma," she murmured. Instinct. Instinct. The flesh is sometimes wiser than the mind, yet at that moment Lasthany could not have told why her trembling fingers had trembled. As for Agatha, she afterwards believed that the rosary which the hands of the terrible Capuchin had held, and on the beads of which he had left his influence, was like the gloves that are mentioned in the chronicles of the days of Catherine de' Medici. She had never heard of them, of course, but she believed that the rosary was contagiously poisoned.